questions. Tim, we'll lead off with you.
Coach, obviously you guys closed on the recruiting trail strong. You had 4 guys who flipped, including Antonio Common on the defensive side. What kind of goes into that flip process, and then what specifically went into flipping Cotman from Boston College?
I think what goes into the flipping process in itself is just maintaining the relationships. You know, these are kids that you're dealing with. They go through different things. They go through different emotions. But, you know, when nobody's paying attention, that's when you get who they really are. And, you know, you're just going through the entire process with allowing guys to get to know you. In the particular case of Cotman, I think it was one of those things where it wasn't necessarily as much as what we done as what the other guys in the recruiting class done by just being present. You know, when it gets crunch time and you know you're going to make a decision, you're looking at guys that you've grown up with, grown up around, that are doing something that you're not doing. And I think with the success that Cam Fleming had, the success that Braylon Johnson had right there in Richmond, winning state championships, and they're on television and everybody's talking about them, they're all over the internet, I think that just made him really rethink the decision. And, you know, Cotman and I had a really good relationship long term. He and his father stayed in contact throughout the entire process. And, you know, in no way, form, or fashion will we push you about it, but just continue to develop a relationship. I mean, he was committed to Boston College, and we'd have just normal conversations at random periods about life and different things that he admired about me and different things that I admired about him. And in the end, I think those are the things that won him over.
And with the other kind of cornerbacks, with Lovett and Fleming, what went into the process of landing those guys, and how do you see those guys fitting in your room at corner?
Well, the thing that we knew as soon as we got here is that we had to go out and get guys to be able to fit the scheme that we wanted to play. You know, my background is man coverage, man press coverage, aggressive, and you got to have people to be able to do that. So those guys were early targets of ours from the very beginning. And again, it just goes back to developing relationships. And, you know, Braylon Johnson's a guy that had a father to play here, but I don't think he was really considering Virginia Tech before our regime took over. And, you know, just developing a relationship, not pushing him. He entertained other schools, and he was kind of the centerpiece. You know, once we got him into place, that kind of held everything together. And again, these kids grow up watching each other. They camp together. They go to a lot of different events together. And one good player sees another good player go somewhere. They want to be a part of that. And what we sold them on is our philosophy is we don't necessarily recruit just corners and safeties. We recruit defensive backs. That's why we call them cheetahs. And what you want to do is you want to be able to get your secondary to the point to where you've got guys with corner skills at every position. Because what offenses do is they try to attack you where you have weaknesses in coverage. We don't know how these guys are going to grow. We don't know how they're going to develop. Some of these guys are 180 now. They'll end up being 215 at some point, and they may move. But we know all of these guys got the ability to be able to cover. Just what you saw this season with Monsieur Delane. You know, he comes in as a safety, and we're able to move him to corner at the snap of a finger because he's a very versatile athlete. And when you're recruiting, what you want to do is compare the guys you're recruiting to the guys on your current roster. So we're going to continue to do that. So you'll continue to see some guys that are termed corners when we're recruiting them, but they're all defensive backs, and we're going to put them where they fit best. Our mission is to get the best 4 or 5 defensive backs on the field at all times.
Mose Phillips was a guy who committed just today and then signed with you guys. I see the smile on your face. What about him do you like so much? How excited are you to get him here?
We're thrilled. I mean, he's the guy that we discovered a while back, and to be honest with you, we didn't want a lot of people to find out about him. You know, our strategy was to visit him late, to keep all of the dialogue down about him. We didn't like a lot of his posts. We didn't follow him a whole lot, you know, because we felt like this guy brought something to the table that, you know, we didn't have and that we're going to need in the future. You know, he's a good-sized, physical defensive back, very aggressive, a guy that can tackle, a guy that can cover, but just a good football player. And down the stretch, you know, it was us and a couple other teams vying for him, but, you know, we were still able to keep the national attention off of him. And I think everybody was kind of thinking the same way. There's a lot of strategy going into what we do, especially at the end, because at the end of recruiting is when guys have been recruiting people for a year, 2 years, and they don't get them. So they're looking for the next best thing. You know, the cloud that you've got over your head right now is the transfer portal, because everybody all of a sudden shifts their attention to the transfer portal, where we were a little bit more focused on the high school guys, because that's what we want to build our program on. So, you know, he was a guy that if there was no transfer portal, you probably would have saw a lot of other people going after. But, we put all guns blazing on him right there toward the end, sent multiple people over there to see him, got him on the phone, developed strong ties and relationships with him. I ran into his parents and him in the airport, as a matter of fact, when he was here, and sit down and had a lot of dialogue with him at that point in time. So we were real thrilled to get him. We really didn't know that we were going to get him up into the last 48 hours or so. And like I said, Coach Pilo was working around the clock, Coach Quinn working around the clock to get it done, and we were able to pull it off.
One of the guys kind of from your neck of the woods, Thomas Williams, South Carolina guy. What do you like about him, and what was his recruitment like? How did he kind of get on your radar?
I love Thomas. I mean, Thomas is right there where I'm from in South Carolina. I'm from Spartanburg County. He's from Greenville County. And, when you're from a place, you got a lot of people that act as bird dogs for you. I've got a lot of people that think they're my assistant coaches that know football. The other piece of it is Mike Hazel went to high school with his high school head coach. But Thomas is a guy from a very small school. School hadn't been in existence probably less than a decade. But he's a guy that's a very, very good football player. And he took a program this year that had never been deep into the playoffs to the state championship, and he just continued to play better. And he plays my high school. He played a lot of guys that I played high school ball with, coach high school ball, so everybody just kept telling me about how good he was. But he was a guy we knew about as soon as we got here. He had camped at Penn State, so they knew about him. They knew his times. So just developed a great relationship with him. And anytime you recruit somebody that's where you're from and you have as many connections as he and I have, it becomes special. So just to be able to hold everybody off, because he played exceptionally well in the playoffs when a lot more cameras get on you because not as many people are playing. And he had a lot of fanfare, and he had some people come at him. But I think the relationship, again, him wanting to be a part of this, the relationships he had with the other guys in this defensive back group won it over for us.
It sounds like Lovett and Fleming had some schools pursue them pretty hard late in the process. They didn't flinch. They didn't go somewhere else. You guys didn't really have any decommitments that I can think of in this class. What do you think about them and how they sort of stood firm with their commitments there in the final run?
Again, I go back to, the overall relationships. The one thing I wanted to do, and the strategy I've always had in recruiting since social media came into play, is I always try to link my guys up in group chats to be able to get them to form relationships. And you want those guys to become really close with one another because, we're doing the recruitment, but there's a big age gap between us. And when it comes to decommitting, when it comes to entertaining somebody else, not only are they letting us down in the sense, they're letting the guys that they've formed these relationships with. The good thing about that group of defensive backs, all of them had people that were coming at them. And, Dante Lovett got on a roll there where, there was somebody different offering him every other day. But, you had Braylon Johnson, who nobody knew about, had people offering him. You had Cam Fleming, who never posted anything, but he was getting offers as well. And those guys were just having those conversations about we're being firm. I had a conversation with Dante, and he actually asked me, during the recruitment process, how everybody felt about him posting the offers. And I told him personally, I like it because I want people to know the caliber of football players that we're getting. And you can't coach this position. You can't play this position if you're worried about competition. I personally don't want to sign a bunch of guys that nobody else wants. We want guys that everybody else wants. So we knew what they were. But again, I think the relationships in the end won over, and not just the relationships that we as a staff had with them, but the relationships that the guys had with each other.
I know you said it's a process for who winds up at corner and who at safety in the long run. Do you have an idea initially who starts out in what room of these guys that you signed?
Yeah, the ones that are listed at corner, Cotman will be here in a few weeks. Mose Phillips will be here in a few weeks. So Cotman will start out in the room with me, and Mose will start out in the room with Coach Pilo at safety. And we'll go through that process and kind of see how it fits. The problem we have right now at corner and safety is we just don't have a lot of numbers to get through spring ball, so we can't be but so flexible. But once all the guys get here together, we'll start Cam, we'll start Dante, we'll start Fleming and Thomas at corner, and we'll start the other guys at safety. And then you start watching one-on-ones, and you start watching their ball skills, and it doesn't take very long to figure out. But we're of the belief that most of these guys can play corner. Like, for instance, Kristen Williams, we were recruiting him a long time ago, and we liked him at corner first, believe it or not. I liked his length. He's a 24-foot long jumper, which means he's an explosive guy. He has really good hips. Naturally, he's a really good receiver, so he has ball skills. So he's a guy that, even though you hadn't heard anything about him playing corner, is a guy that could protect and play over there as well. But really what you do is you just get them out there and just start watching how good of a football player they are and things that they do naturally. And then we have to just put our coaching expertise and say he can help us best here or there. The other unique thing you'll find out about most of this group is they're offensive players as well. You know, we got to have guys that have ball skills. I say all the time, you know, one of the things that we've got to have to be an effective defense is a nickel, a quality nickel. And in order to be a good nickel, you've got to be able to play slot receiver because you got to be able to cover them. You know, we were very weak in the secondary this year in the sense that we had to take Shamari Connor, who was just one of our good football players, and play him at nickelback because we didn't have anybody else that could do that, and he was the best option, and that's not what he does. It probably worked against him a little bit in the sense of, you know, just going out there and having to line up against guys like Josh Downs in man coverage because we didn't have the other people on the football roster to be able to do it. So we wanted to be able to go out and get guys like that, and even though you look at Takai Heath is a guy we were looking at early in the process as a nickel. But again, I've watched Taiki play myself, and he's a great slot as well. So we've got a lot of guys in the signing class that can do a lot of different things for us. But when you put a bunch of good football players on your football team, it works itself out.
Last question in the room. We'll go to Aaron, then Zoom.
Coach, we're not that far removed from an era where people would just fax in their thing. You guys would send out a press release, and that'd be the end of it. As a guy who's energetic and sort of likes to put on a show a little bit, I mean, how much fun was today? What did the program get out of doing it this way? What do you think the kids got out of doing it the way you guys did it?
It was a lot of fun, and it was a reward to our recruiting staff, a reward to our coaching staff, but more than anything, a reward for those young men that have stood firm with us, that have believed in us, and the parents that have trusted us with their kids. And everything in this day and era is recruiting. And what you saw today was a recruiting tool. We've got more information out there on the internet right now than probably anybody in America just because of the volume of stuff that we posted and the uniqueness of what we did. And we've got young guys calling us. We've got young guys reaching out to us. We've got other coaches reaching out to us because they noticed that. So what that was today was a reward for the guys that we signed, but it's also a jump start to the guys that we're going to sign next year because they want to be a part of something like that. And, you know, we'll throw some new wrinkles into it next year. But in the game of recruiting, you've always got to stay ahead. You've always got to do things to grasp people's attention. And once you get people's attention, then that's when you go to work on being able to recruit them and do everything else. But when you're not winning ball games, when you hadn't won ball games in a long time, your logo itself is not selling. So you've got to come up with other things to be able to grasp the attention of guys. And I think being able to sign as many Virginia and footprint guys as we did this year, those guys are going to become our best recruiters by their presence alone. Because when you get a bunch of guys that are good football players, that have won state championships, that are popular guys, all from one area, guys grew up watching them. So we're going to have a bunch of guys from Richmond, Virginia on this football team next year. So naturally, the guys from Richmond, Virginia are going to look at Virginia Tech in a way they might not have this year because of the presence of guys that they look up to and admire.
On Zoom, please use the raise hand feature for questions for Coach. We'll open it to questions. Any final questions for Coach on Zoom? Okay, Coach, thank you for your time.
All right, guys. Thank y'all.